Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Jack Smith.
I'm Anish Gupta.
And I'm Evan Wanish from the Bucs Wave Instagram page.
You want to tell them a little bit about your page?
Of course. It is one of the biggest Buccaneers Instagram fan pages out there. Over 24,000 followers right now and continuing to grow. So really happy that you guys invited me on here and really glad to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on. I'm sure you like having Tom Brady now on the Buccaneers, bringing a lot of people towards that fan page from New England. But speaking about that, do you want to get us started talking about the Buccaneers offseason? Obviously, a couple huge moves with Tom Brady, bringing back Rob Gronkowski from retirement. You want to start us off, give us some of your opinions on these moves?
Yeah, well, I mean, both of them shocked me. I don't think – if you ask most people, even around the Bucs, Bucs reporters, Bucs fans, I think most were expecting that Jameis Winston was going to return because they just didn't think that Tom Brady was ever going to leave New England. And, I mean, it's safe to say that I didn't think so either. That's like, this Last Dance documentary's been out, right? That's like Michael Jordan going and playing for another team as well. I know he played for the Wizards, but you can't picture that, and you can't picture a guy like Tom Brady in another uniform, and yet here we are. Even more shocking is that a month later brings his buddy out of retirement, Rob Gronkowski, who I'll tell you that shocked me more than the Brady stuff. Just from a pure standpoint of I just didn't expect it at all. That's not something that I think was on the Buccaneers' plans this offseason. I didn't think I knew that they obviously targeted Tom Brady, but I didn't think they believed they would get him. And obviously they definitely weren't considering Rob Gronkowski before Brady even got into the fold. So two big additions and a lot of star power now on the Tampa Bay offense.
So I got a couple questions for you, man. I think when we look at this, I think the Bucs offseason was one of the most interesting out of all the teams. Obviously, they got the big splash, Tom Brady. I mean, it's just crazy to think about that he's not going to be suited up in a New England uniform. I think that's going to be so shocking to see. I obviously can't wait for that. But I kind of want to touch up on the things going back to last season, right? So Jameis Winston was the quarterback, obviously the first overall pick back in 2015. He leads the league in passing yards, right? I'm not sure if he led the league in passing touchdowns, but I know he was up there.
I believe he was second.
Yeah, I think second to
Lamar.
I don't know if it was Lamar Jackson.
Lamar
I
did.
think so. Yeah. But obviously, we do know he led the league in picks by a very, very large margin. But I was following like Jameis Winston's kind of season throughout the course of the year. I kind of had him in fantasy a few games, but like this dude would have, those games where he goes for 400 and, like 4 touchdowns, lead a comeback like against the Colts, I believe, he'd have those type of games, right? Even against the Rams where I think he dropped like 55. And then there would be those questionable games where he just has like 5 turnovers against the Panthers, right? So, I still believe that Jameis Winston can be a starter in this league. I think with the right coaching and the right development. Obviously, he had that LASIK eye surgery. I don't know how much it's going to help, but what are your thoughts on, Jameis Winston being let go? Do you see him maybe starting again in the NFL? Where do you see kind of his projection going forward?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is one of the most fascinating seasons I've ever seen from a quarterback. I mean, you're talking about a guy, like you said, you had him on fantasy. I mean, some weeks he would single-handedly win your game, and some weeks he would just single-handedly lose it for you. So, and that was the same thing with the Buccaneers in real life. And they ultimately decided that the 30 interceptions was just too much. But I think Jameis Winston still has just a ton of talent and potential. The guy's still only 26 years old. I mean, he's not, I know he's been the starter for 5 years, but he's not like a 30-year-old. He's still got some good years ahead of him, and he's been relatively healthy his entire career. So I do believe that down the line eventually, obviously not this year being in New Orleans, but whether that's in New Orleans or somewhere else, he'll be a starter somewhere down the line for some team. And I think he'll be successful, but I also don't think you're going to get a very changed Jameis Winston. Like, I don't expect him to throw 30 interceptions ever again in a season. That's
Oh yeah.
that's a crazy number. That's not going to happen again. And even if Tampa Bay retained him, that wouldn't have happened again. But I still think, any team that gets Jameis Winston has to expect sort of a roller coaster. All the talent in the world, but you never know what you're going to get week to week. And the Bucs just felt like they needed more stability at the QB position.
Yeah, I completely
Kind
agree.
of adding on to that. I don't know if you don't mind, Jack. I got a couple more questions on just the Buccaneers team in general. Obviously, kind of touched on Tom Brady already, but let's go to the defensive side of the ball. The Bucs defense was kind of inconsistent. I know their pass coverage has just been pretty lackluster, to say the least, over the last couple of years. I still remember, right? They let guys like Christian Kirk come back from injury and drop 150 and 3 touchdowns on them. So their secondary needs some work. Obviously, we've seen some kind of misses in the first round. Vernon Hargreaves to be one name to mention. Obviously, I believe he's playing in Houston now. So there have been some guys that have been up and down in the roster in the secondary. But you found a gem here in Shaq Barrett, right? Coming off, I believe he had 19 and a half sacks. Crazy stat line this year. So and they've got some playmakers, right? Devon White, Levante David is still there. So for this defense, I think it's just that back half that of the defensive side of the football, especially the secondary, because obviously Tom Brady had one of the best secondaries in the NFL last season, right? The two McCourty brothers, Stephon Gilmore. He had that last year to kind of help him. Obviously, he's getting a bit older. We don't know how he's going to do next year, but kind of touch on the defensive side. Where do you see this Bucs defense do you think they should take a step forward with their new additions, kind of new playmakers? Where do you see this defense going?
I do think they take a step forward. I think a big reason is defensive coordinator Todd Bowles. I think he is one of the better defensive coordinators in the NFL, and I feel like he is going to be able to get the best out of these guys. The Bucs secondary has been very lackluster, and Vernon Hargreaves is a great example of it. But they have a lot of high draft picks invested in guys like Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting and Jamel Dean, 3 corners, who really played well last year. And down the stretch, sometimes they were the reason that the Buccaneers were winning games or maybe in games, because the Texans game that was in Tampa, Jameis Winston threw 4 interceptions, but the Bucs only lost by 3 points because the Buccaneer defense was able to hold off Deshaun Watson. And Carlton Davis, who was covering DeAndre Hopkins the whole game, I believe only limited him to about 3 or 4 catches that entire game. So there's definitely some bright spots there, a lot of inexperience, but there's definitely some bright spots. And like you said, just looking at the overall defense, when you got guys like Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul and Levante David and Devon White and Vita Vea, Ndamukong Suh. So there's a lot of talent on this team, but really the defense, I believe that the Buccaneers defense is a solid defense, but I believe it could go to being a very good or great defense if that secondary can really start to continue to develop, and guys like Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting. And then they also, drafted Antoine Winfield Jr. this year in the draft, young safety. If he comes in, starts to play well, I think you're going to see a big turnaround on defense.
Yeah, and I think that realistically, Tom Brady's going to put the Buccaneers defense in a lot better situations than Jameis Winston would leave them in. I mean, when you throw 30 picks a year and fumble however many times that he did, your defense is going to be on the field a lot, and they're going to be in a lot of terrible situations. And Tom Brady just simply doesn't do that, which is why the Patriots defense has been so successful. One thing I kind of want to touch on is the defensive front. Over the offseason, I really predicted that the Bucs would only be able to return – 1 or 2 of the 3 kind of big names they had free agency, Ndamukong Suh, Jason Pierre-Paul, and Shaquille Barrett, but somehow they found a way to bring all 3 of them back. What do you think of that?
I think that was huge. I'm not the biggest Ndamukong Suh fan, but I do believe that he is important to this team. They had the number 1 rushing defense in the NFL last year, and he was a big part of it. So if you want to keep that up, you're going to have to retain some pieces. And, their priorities in the offseason were, number 1, they had to keep the defensive line together. And then number 2, it was go find a quarterback. So they made sure they got all their guys locked up, and they did lose Carl Nassib to the Raiders, but he was a rotational pass rusher. And obviously they would have liked to work out a long-term deal with Shaq Barrett. They had to settle for the franchise tag, but I would expect them to complete a long-term deal either this summer or next offseason. I don't think Barrett's going to go anywhere, but I mean, absolutely huge to keep that defensive front, because with defense, especially with defensive line, I think a lot of it is chemistry. And these guys in the second year of the same system, I think it's going to be huge.
So kind of let's switch back to the offense. I mean, Tom Brady, again, I seem to mention him every time I kind of ask you a question, but, he's got two weapons, right? He's got two big ones, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. And I know Jack is very high on Mike Evans. We continue to have these receiver debates, as we kind of told you earlier. He thinks Evans is above Devontae Adams. I'm kind of disagreeing, but, still nonetheless, Mike Evans is a great, great receiver. Definitely a top 10 along with Chris Godwin. I have them both in my top 10. So, Tom Brady goes from kind of inconsistent play back in New England with Philip Dorsett, all these guys, Mohamed Sanu, Julian Edelman kind of in the fold. They weren't really doing much. Now he gets some weapons, right? Now he gets Rob Gronkowski, obviously. He gets Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. O.J. Howard is still there. So kind of two questions. Where do you see Mike Evans and Chris Godwin kind of, do you see them even taking a bigger leap than what they did with Jameis Winston? Because I do think Jameis Winston can throw the ball like he has been, right? He throws it a lot, and he's still at a relatively decent rate, getting, amassing 5,000 yards. But do you see Tom Brady doing better with them, right? And how are they going to kind of manage O.J. Howard, who's still a pretty athletic and talented tight end, with Rob Gronkowski, right? So there's four guys. Obviously, Perriman left. I was a big fan of him in Tampa Bay. He had some great games towards the end of the year. So my kind of one question is, where do you see Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and all those weapons kind of, how does it work with Tom Brady? How do you see that working?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are two of the top receivers in the NFL. Especially a guy like Chris Godwin, who I think really proved it last year.
Mm-hmm.
He was sort of on that fringe kind of, and this year really proved it. So
I think he's better than Evans, but
okay. I mean,
that's my opinion. I think last year he kind of proved it, but we'll see. But yeah, those two guys.
The crazy part is that's not a crazy statement to say. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm not surprised. I'm not going to sit here and say you're wrong, because I definitely see there are areas of Chris Godwin's game that are just so much better than Mike Evans's, but there's also areas of the game where Evans is better. So, both these guys went over 1,000 yards last year. I don't know if both go out over 1,000 this year, just because, I guess, like you said, you have Rob Gronkowski now, who's Tom Brady's familiar with. That's going to be Tom Brady's maybe go-to guy on a third down or in the red zone. Mm-hmm. So they might receive less targets there. And another reason why I don't think they'll both go over 1,000 is because ideally the Bucs aren't going to be throwing the ball as much. Because ideally, their offensive line is a bit better, and they can run the ball a bit better with Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughn. So the ideal thing is that they're not throwing the ball nearly as much. And I know that they tried to get Jameis Winston help. They didn't want him throwing as much, but a lot of times they just had to. So. And for that, I do think that Tom Brady with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin can do some great things. In New England, especially towards the end, Tom Brady he just didn't have any weapons. I think this year you're really going to see whether Tom Brady's 2019 season, which was good but not really like a Tom Brady type year, especially towards the end. I think you're going to see whether that was the real Tom Brady, the declining Tom Brady. Yep. Or if that was just the result of just not having enough guys, just not having guys that can get separation.
Yeah.
So.
So I want to kind of piggyback off of Anish's receiver question and ask you who you think is the third receiver for this team coming into this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, Perriman did a great job, but unfortunately, he did a little bit too good of a job and got himself paid a little bit more than the Bucs, and then the Bucs were willing to, So. And good for him getting paid or whatever. That's great. So I do believe that they like Scotty Miller, who actually played pretty well and had I believe, 2 different hamstring injuries during the course of the year. One that sidelined him for the first 4 or 5 games, and then another one towards the end of the year that basically ended his season. So, and I believe that game was against Detroit, and he had a pretty long touchdown. Was developing some chemistry. So they like him. He's like a speed guy. And they also like, their 5th round pick this year, Tyler Johnson from Minnesota. And right now, if I had to predict who was going to be the 3rd wide receiver, I think Johnson could be in that running. I really think that he's a good fit for the Tampa Bay offense. However, what Scotty Miller has that Tyler Johnson really doesn't is you look at both of those guys. Scotty Miller seems like the prototypical Tom Brady wide receiver. Just does. A small guy who's quick, can do out routes, can do curls, stuff like that, like a Julian Edelman type. And, that might be in his favor. And I think Tom's going to have some input on that. I really do. Like the coaching staff will ask him who you feel more comfortable with, and we'll see what he says. But I think Tyler Johnson has a pretty good shot of being that 3rd guy.
So kind of to switch on the draft here, kind of talk about the 1st round, right? Obviously you mentioned round 5, the receiver, Scotty Miller, I believe. So the tackles are kind of going down, right? Pick 4, Andrew Thomas to New York. My Browns took Jedrick Wills at pick 10, steal in my opinion. And the Jets, I was kind of looking at it. I thought, okay, would they go Becton, Wirfs? I thought they were going to go Wirfs, and they actually took Becton. Not a bad pick, but I thought Wirfs was a better fit. So now Wirfs is kind of sliding, and Bucs were at 14, and I believe they traded up for it. So what were your kind of thoughts on trading up for Tristan Wirfs, who I believe is one of the best tackles here? I think it was a great fit for Tom Brady, especially his ability to play guard and tackle. What were your thoughts on that pick? And do you think it's going to help the running game a lot more? Because I just don't see – I haven't seen a consistent running back for the Buccaneers in a while since Doug Martin. So what are your thoughts on the Tristan Wirfs selection?
Yeah, well, side note, I think your Browns got a fantastic player. He was my top ranked tackle. So
I'm excited for that.
The Buccaneers landed my 2nd ranked tackle, and they landed him in a spot where I did not expect them to. I was going through all these mock drafts before the draft, and not many of them, man. Like even my own scenarios never really had Tristan Wirfs being available to Tampa Bay. So when he gets past 10 and then he gets past 11 with the Jets, they pick Becton. There's one guy left, and I knew the Raiders obviously weren't going to take him at 12. They were pretty clear that they're not taking him.
They already have O-line. Exactly.
Apparently the 49ers were in talks with a team, possibly a team like the Miami Dolphins, that were looking to move up for Tristan Wirfs. And so the Buccaneers said, hey, we'll give you a 4th round pick to move up one spot. It's to have him ranked that high. They wanted one of the top 4 tackles, and I think they were going to do whatever they could in their power to get one of those guys, and they were able to do it. So at the end of the day, you got to think of it this way. Are you going to be willing to miss out on a top tackle, which you need, over a 4th round pick? I don't think at the end of the day Jason Light was basically thinking to himself, it's a 4th round pick's nice, but if you have him ranked high enough, you got to go and get him.
So, with the whole running back situation, right, I personally thought they should go after Devontae Freeman coming out of Atlanta, who just got released. I think he's a great running back and a great fit for them. What are your thoughts on, Ronald Jones? I think Peyton Barber, they're both still there. Who do you think kind of steps up and takes over that role as the lead running back? Or do you think they should go after one of these free agents there? What are your thoughts on kind of the whole running back situation in Tampa Bay?
Yeah, so Peyton Barber is actually not on the Buccaneers anymore.
He's in Washington, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah, they signed him for really cheap. My bad.
Yeah. No,
they got him for a steal.
Yeah, about like $2 million.
$2 million, I think. Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that.
But the Bucs drafted Ronald Jones in the 2nd round 2 years ago, and his rookie season was god awful. Like it was bad. It was to the point where they weren't even giving him carries. Like, he wasn't even getting in the game to screw up. Like, when he was in the game, he wasn't doing good. But even when they, it was to the point where Peyton Barber was getting every single carry. So I do think that the previous coaching staff that had Jones in Tampa Bay did misuse him. I mean, to not give the guy any carries, I think is a little unfair. How are you supposed to develop, without getting any reps? But yeah, I mean, Jones came out in 2019, had a much better year, but I mean, it would have been pretty hard not to have a better year after his 2018. So he did have a much better year, and he showed signs of what he could be. And that's an explosive player who, is not perfect, but he's a nice pairing back. He's never going to be, I don't think, that lead guy that you can hand the ball off to 20 times a game. He's just not. But I think if you get him in the right system with the right back to complement him, I think it could work. And they feel that they possibly have that with, third-round pick Keyshawn Vaughn, who at the time I thought was a little bit of a reach. But, we'll see how it plays out. If he can be a good complement, that's like a pretty good two-headed guy there. And, I think Keyshawn Vaughn would probably be a little bit better than Peyton Barber. Obviously, you don't know with a rookie, but, speaking of like Devontae Freeman, I thought he would have been a solid match for the Bucs, and he may still be. I believe he's still on the open market, so maybe they make a move there. If they get into training camp, whenever that may be, they get into camp and maybe they don't like what they see from Vaughn right away, and they're like, like they want to win now, so they want to make sure that they have the best roster possible to win now. So if they don't feel like Vaughn and Jones could give them the best shot to win, they'll go out and get somebody. So Devontae Freeman could still definitely be in the mix. But for now, I would say the Bucs are comfortable with their two backs, and they hope, with an improved offensive line, Tristan Wirfs, who was a top tackle in college, they're hoping that it's improved, and thus the run game will improve also.
Yeah, as a huge USC fan, I'm a big Ronald Jones fan myself. So I've always wanted to see him succeed. And yeah, his rookie year was god awful, but his 2019 was much more promising. I still believe he was kind of misused even last year. But I think that hopefully he can prove to be a starting running back in the NFL. And I want to see him be able to succeed this year. But I know Anish kind of disagrees on that one.
But yeah, let's kind of transition into awards, kind of look into the future for this team. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement brewing down there in Tampa Bay. So we kind of got awards for you guys as we've been doing the past few episodes: Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. You kind of want to get us started, Evan, on who is the Offensive Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year for the Bucs?
Yeah, so Offensive Player of the Year, I'm gonna go with. So sort of like an easier one, not really going to go too far out. I'm going to say Mike Evans. I think that Mike Evans has a really good year with Tom Brady throwing in the ball. I think that obviously him and James Winston had really good chemistry, but I think Tom Brady can mesh pretty much with anybody at this point. I think Mike Evans is good enough to mesh with any quarterback. So I think the Brady to Evans connection will be in full effect, and I believe that Mike Evans will have a strong season.
So, you mind giving us your Defensive Player of the Year as well?
Yeah, of course. So here I'm going to go with Levante David, and not a lot of people, a lot of people are talking about the Buccaneers nationally, right? And for good reason. There's a lot of names, but not a lot of people mention Levante David. I don't know why. He's one of the most underrated players in this league. Is he the best linebacker in the league? I don't know, but I mean, if you compare his stats based on like some of the best, like that, or some of the guys that people consider the best, like a Bobby Wagner, pretty darn close. And Levante David's better than him in some or a lot of categories. So I think he had a good year last year, but I think this year he's going to be able to prove. This is going to be the most national attention that he's going to get, and he has been a victim of just being on a team that hasn't been good. So he hasn't gotten the love that he should have. And I think this year he's really going to prove it that, he is one of the top linebackers in the NFL.
So I think those are great points you've made. I think for Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going to go receiver, but I'm going to go with Chris Godwin. I'm I love Mike Evans. Don't get me wrong. I hope people don't think I hate him, but I think when you look at it, right, there's a lot of weapons there, and I just think teams are going to draw a lot more attention on Mike Evans and Rob Gronkowski still, and they're still sleeping on Chris Godwin. I think his ability kind of in those, those 10 to 20-yard situations that he gets into, he just gets so wide open sometimes. I think his route tree is amazing.
I mean,
And I
and
just think
he catches everything anyway. So.
exactly. I think he's going to absolutely thrive. I can even see him, in short yardage situations in the red zone. I mean, he had a good amount of touchdowns this year. So I got Chris Godwin as my offensive player of the year. And for defensive player of the year, it was really close. Again, I got another linebacker, though. I got Devon White coming out of LSU. I think he went in the top 5. Dude was amazing his rookie year, and obviously working alongside Levante David, I think he's only going to get better. And I do agree with you. David is one of the most underrated linebackers of the 2010s. Since 2013, he's been an absolute beast, and just a great guy in terms of rushing the passer while also being great in pass coverage. He can play. I've seen him sometimes a middle linebacker, but I know he plays right outside. So I love his game, but I got to go with Devin White just because I feel like he has more talent, more raw talent, and I think he's going to be a lot better in his second year. Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, on offense, while you do want to go receiver, I think you got to look that if these receivers are having good seasons, it's because they have great quarterback play coming. So offensive player of the year, I find it hard to deny this award from Tom Brady. So I think coming in with the weapons he has, way better than he did in New England. I think you're going to see his play come back up again to not MVP levels, but he's going to be in the top 5, probably top 10 quarterback play. So I think he'll win offensive player of the year for the Buccaneers. On defense, I also went with Devin White, Anish. I think that just the talent level that he has, I still believe that he was one of the best players in last year's draft. And it kind of sucked to see him go down at the beginning of the year with injury, but towards the end, he proved that he is that tremendous talent that went in the top 5. So I think that he'll prove to be one of the top middle linebackers in the league this year. If not, I mean, next year. I think that these next 2 years will be crucial for Devin White. So do you want to get us started on the offensive rookie and defensive rookie of the year predictions?
Yeah, I mean, sure. So the offensive rookie, it's tough because the top pick obviously is Tristan Wirfs, but is a tackle. So, like, when you think of offensive rookie of the year, you're thinking quarterback, running back, receiver, right? Tight end. You're thinking guys like that. So, as far as impact on like play-by-play basis, I think Tristan Wirfs might have the biggest impact. But offensive rookie of the year, I'm going to go with Tyler Johnson. I think that, having Tom Brady as the quarterback is a big benefit here. And having all these weapons, that's a good reason why I think, Chris Godwin being the offensive player of the year isn't crazy. Mike Evans probably going to get doubled a lot of the time. Rob Gronkowski probably going to get doubled. Who can these teams? You can't cover everybody. You can't double team every single person. So, when Mike Evans is doubled, and let's say Chris Godwin's doubled, and Rob Gronkowski's being paid close attention. Let's say a team has like an elite safety or something, and he gets shut down. I think that's where a guy like Tyler Johnson could really clean up, against a slot corner or against an outside corner. I think he can play both inside and outside. So I think Tyler Johnson, while he won't be like this super guy that has 700, 800 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, but I think, he's going to get the job done. He's going to be a serviceable wide receiver 3. So, and then defensive rookie, this one's a little bit easier for me. Antoine Winfield, right? I think I like the pick. I like the direction they went. I wasn't a huge fan of their running back in the second round. I wasn't a big fan of that idea. So if I was running a team, I probably would have picked a defensive lineman there. But was more than happy with Winfield. I think he's going to make an immediate impact. I think he was my second ranked safety behind Xavier McKinney. So he was a big time get, and I think he's gonna have a pretty good year and a really solid career.
So for offensive and defensive rookies, I think for the Bucs, it's kind of there's not a lot of options. Obviously, you picked 2 Minnesota guys. So I'm gonna, for me at least, offensive line is just such a huge facet of the game. I say this every single episode, but I think Jack's gotten pretty tired of it. But I think for me, the three biggest things on offense are quarterback, coach, and offensive line. I think that's what wins you games. That's what keeps you consistent. Obviously, we've seen that with the Patriots and the Steelers. Two teams have had all three. And now Tom Brady comes to the Bucs, right? So, and I like Bruce Arians as a coach. I'm a huge fan of him. So now they're kind of fixing their offensive line, right? I believe they still have Ali Marpet there. I'm not sure, but I like him there. And now they get Tristan Wirfs. So I think he's going to be the offensive rookie of the year just off impact. I know you went with Tyler Johnson just because he's a receiver, and which is totally understandable just because I feel like he'll have the more flashy kind of games. But I just think Wirfs is going to be such a huge, huge part of this team because of his mobility, especially if, obviously Tom Brady just can't move a lot, and his ability to move laterally is very, very crucial during passing situations, especially on third down. So I think that's a great, great addition for them. Defensive rookie, I'm going to go with Antoine Winfield. So I'm going with the top two picks. But, hey, Antoine Winfield is a great safety. I think it was really close between him and Delpit. For being honest, I actually did want Winfield over Delpit as a Browns fan, but I was okay with either. But I think Winfield has a lot of potential. He plays a lot taller than he actually is. Obviously, coming from a Big Ten school, he's played some good competition, and I think that's very important when you look at these college players transitioning into the NFL. I think level of competition is absolutely huge. Coming from a great conference like that, I think he's set up for success in the NFL. So those are my two rookies. Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm also going with the Minnesota sweep. I've watched Tyler Johnson play a lot, actually, and he was kind of a stud at Minnesota at times,
Big Ten, baby.
beating out Rashad Bateman, who's their star receiver right now. So I think that coming into this powerful offense to be the third receiver most likely, he'll get a lot of targets from Brady because Brady likes to share the wealth to all of the weapons. And with all the focus going to the other bigger name players, I think Johnson could feast in certain scenarios. So I think that he will win the third wide receiver spot and be the offensive rookie of the year for the Bucs. And then on defense, you guys hit the nail on the head. I'm also going Antoine Winfield, safety, who I was close to putting him as my number one safety in the draft above Xavier McKinney. He was a very close second. So to be able to get him at pick 45 was a pretty big steal in my opinion. So I like that pick. I think it shores up the secondary. So tremendous pick in my opinion. Do you want to get us started on a breakout candidate this year, or maybe a most improved player is kind of what we've been going on in past episodes?
Yeah, this one to me is probably the toughest one because there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for a guy to break out or really like improve, and it's something that you just don't know. It's development, right? You don't know how well the guy is going to transition from year whatever to the next year. He could be a second year player. He could be a fifth year player. You just don't know. So I'm going to go maybe with a surprise here, but I feel pretty good based on this guy's 2019 season. I'm going to go with Carlton Davis, cornerback. Not saying that he's going to be a lockdown corner because I don't think he will be. I think that he's going to prove this year that he is a solid cornerback in the NFL and can play cornerback for an NFL team and is able to, like I said, not lock down a team's top receiver, but is able to limit what a team's top receiver can do. So I'm not saying that, hey, you put him on one side of the field and you can forget it because that's covered. No, that's not the case. But I do believe that he can prove that you can rely on him to say, okay, well, we can put Davis on so-and-so. We can put Davis on Julio, and Julio's going to get his catches because it's Julio Jones. But it's not going to be 150, 200 yards against Carlton Davis. So I'm going to go. I'm going to go with this third. Now this is going to be his fourth year, I believe. Fourth year. Actually, no, third. Sorry, apologize.
No problem.
So I'm going to go with the young corner out of Auburn, Carlton Davis.
So again, I think, this pick actually for me was one of the easiest picks out of all the teams for most improved. And I keep going with the same positions, just different players. I am very excited about this pick. I think the breakout player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is Jamel Dean. And I am very confident saying that. When he came in, we were actually doing a redraft a few weeks ago. And I had him going in the first round. And this dude coming out of Auburn in the third round, 17 passes defended. And he did not get a lot of playing time initially in the beginning of the year. I think he played a lot towards the end, but 17 passes defended. I know he played full 13 games, but I know he didn't start in all of them.
His first start was week 9 versus Seattle.
Yeah,
that was his first official start.
Exactly. And to have 17, I know I'm saying that a lot, but that is a very, very huge number. Passes defended is a stat that is not easily accumulated in the NFL, and people tend to overlook it. It is very hard to even get 10. And this dude has 17 as a rookie, right? Obviously, he did play alongside Carlton Davis. I know you like him, but I think he was the real corner of this team. And now coming in, I mean, he's got height. He's 6'1". Obviously, he got 2 interceptions along with that. He needs to get better at tackling. I know that's one of the big issues. He only has 16 solo tackles again, but then again, he didn't play as much. So I think his pass coverage is just sensational. I think if he can get better, especially at tackling in terms of run support, but Tampa Bay are already one of the best run-stopping teams in the NFL. So he just needs to stick to his role. I mean, if he can get better at tackling, that would be great. But, man, I'm really excited for this kid out of Auburn, Jamel Dean. I think he's going to do great, and that is my breakout player of the year. Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, this might have been an easy decision for you, but it definitely wasn't for me. There were a lot of candidates on this Buccaneers team. You look at Vita Vea, who I think could take the next step as a defensive lineman. We've already mentioned Devon White in his second year. Jamel Dean I also thought of, but I'm going to go on the offensive side of the ball in a Bruce Arians system. I'm going to go with Ronald Jones. Peyton Barber is now gone.
The USC guy, of course.
Yeah, it's a little bit biased. I'm going to stand by it. I think that now that Peyton Barber's gone, Jones is going to have more of a chance to run the ball as the number one back in a Bruce Arians system. And now that the other teams have to focus so much on the pass, I think that the running the ball will be a little bit more open. So I think that Jones could feast this year, maybe touch 1,000 yards. I'm not sure, but it'll definitely be better than his last 2 years now that he finally gets an opportunity. I could be wrong, but I'm going to trust my guy and go with Ronald Jones. So do you guys want to start us out on record predictions?
Yeah, give like a floor or a ceiling and then a realistic one.
Yeah, it's fine. Well, the one thing I want to touch on with the Ronald Jones is I think a big thing would be the improved offensive line play. I think that's a big reason. So I like all your guys' breakout players. I really do. Just wanted to get that out there. So a floor for this team. I hate to before the season. So Bucs fans, obviously you're a Browns fan, so you can probably relate to this.
Yeah.
Bucs fans have a lot of false hope. That especially with the Browns last year. I mean, just look at it, right?
Oh yeah.
So a lot of people are wondering, are the 2020 Buccaneers basically the 2019 Browns? And I just don't see how you can compare them because of one man, and that's, Bruce Arians versus Freddie Kitchens. You had a guy who just wasn't ready to be a coach, and then you got a guy who's a 2-time coach of the year. So I think the floor for this team is probably 8 wins. I think that's the lowest that you're going to see is an 8-8 season. That's assuming that the key parts are healthy. Obviously, if Tom Brady goes down week 2 and Blaine Gabbert has to start, 13 and 14 games, then you're probably looking at a different record and a worse record than 8-8. But assuming everybody stays relatively healthy, of course, there's bumps and bruises along the way. But I would say 8-8 is probably the floor. The ceiling, this is tough. This is where you start to get into, I'm not probably 12-4. I would say 12-4 is probably the ceiling. They still play in a division with New Orleans. They have to play them twice. They have to play Atlanta twice. I know Carolina is going through a sort of a rebuild, but I mean, they got to play Kansas City. They got to play Minnesota. They got to play Green Bay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams on here that are going to be tough games. And I don't see, I would be surprised if they only lost 3 of those games. So I think 12-4 is probably the ceiling for this team. And I think, both could happen. I wouldn't be, like I said, covering the Bucs for this long. I mean, there's been so many years where you thought, oh man, they're going to be pretty good this year. And then they go 5-11, they're not going to do great this year. And they go 9-7. So you never really know on a year-to-year basis. But I will say, I believe that their record is going to be 11-5. I think 11-5 is fair. Looking at their schedule, when they play the games, who they play them against, where they play them, I think 11-5 is a fair record. And I think tons of Bucs fans would be happy because that would mean the first playoff berth of the Buccaneers since 2007. So,
man, I love your points, man. I think you've made some great points, especially with the record. I still remember that 9-7 season. I believe it was 2016. I was like,
yeah,
damn, the Bucs could make the playoffs. I still remember it came down to week 17. Just the whole playoff seeding did not fall their way, but I do remember that year.
They lost. They missed out on a tiebreaker.
Yeah, I think it was like a 3-way tie. I don't remember, but it was a long time ago. But I know they were close. But yeah, obviously as a Browns fan, I know that feeling all too well. You think it's going to be the year, and then boom, 6-10, you get hit with that, or a 4-12 season. I mean, I've seen it all. But I think with the Bucs, it's just there's so many kind of uncertainties, right? There's so many questions because Tom Brady is 43 come August, right? Come September, he will be 43 years old. There is a lot of questions there. Obviously, Tom Brady is the GOAT, no question about it. If there is one quarterback I will not bet against, it is Tom Brady, and I think everyone here can agree with that. So when I look at the schedule, I think the New Orleans game right away is going to be tough. I think that's an early L. But I think they get a scheduling break throughout the first 8 games. Obviously, they do have to play Green Bay, but Tom Brady will have a few weeks under his belt, so I think they can win that game, right? So there are those games that you see on the schedule that I think Tom Brady could easily win, and there are some games that I think they might lose. Like I think they might lose one to Atlanta that they should have won. I just feel like Atlanta's a team that does that sometimes. Obviously, they did that with the 49ers last year.
It's a division game too. So
exactly, yeah, exactly. So I see them going maybe 4-2 in the division, maybe 3-3, but I think 4-2 is where they probably go. So I'm kind of looking at it. I think my floor, it's a tough one, but I got to go either 7 or 9, 8-8. I just think maybe if the chips don't fall right, they still have a lot of playmakers. So even if Tom Brady doesn't play as well, they've got a lot of playmakers, both on offense and defense. And again, I'm a huge fan of the secondary coming in with Winfield and Dean. You even brought up Davis. So I kind of like where they're going there. So I think 7-9, 8-8 is kind of their ultimate floor. Ceiling, I'm not going to go Skip Bayless and say 13-3. I think that was just absurd, but I think their ceiling is 12-4. I think that's a really good place to keep it. I just think if all the chips fall right, because they did go 7-9 with Jameis Winston, right? Despite all those turnovers. And Jack brought up a great point. If you turn the ball over so much, obviously the defense is going to be placed in a very bad position. And they were still ranked in, I think you said number 1 rush defense. I'm not sure, but I know they were top 3.
Yep.
For
number 1.
a whole part. Yeah, exactly. So, and to have that despite, being on the field so much, they constantly lost time of possession. I think that was their ultimate demise this season. They could have easily been a playoff team this year. They had some games where I just thought, what happened? Why did they lose? But they also had some games where they played well. So I think Tom Brady's going to fix a lot of those issues. So I think my realistic prediction, it's really tough, but I was leaning 9-7 kind of at the beginning of this video, but I think I'll kind of talk myself into going 10-6, maybe 11-5, but I'm going to stick with 10-6 here. Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you guys said it perfectly. I think my floor is going to be 7-9 because we all know the NFL is a ruthless league. You can never really predict what's going to happen. The Buccaneers are probably the hardest team to predict, really, in the NFL. Just kind of like the Browns last year, like you mentioned. And ceiling, I'm gonna go 12-4 because they're in a rough division, one of the hardest in the league. Maybe the 4th or 3rd hardest division in the league, just because I think that Atlanta is going to be better this year. I thought they were going to be good last year. Obviously, injuries.
Hey, just to keep clear, he had the Falcons and the Chargers in the Super Bowl. So
hey, we're going to forget about that. I made up for that with the Chiefs prediction. But then New Orleans, obviously a juggernaut every year. So they're going to drop a couple division games. I think that the Panthers, they're always difficult, especially in interdivision. So I think that 12-4 is the ceiling. Realistically, I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna go 11-5 because I think I trust Brady. I trust Arians a lot more than I trusted previous Buccaneers coaches. And then Todd Bowles as a defensive coordinator, hated him as a head coach for the Jets. He's a great defensive coordinator. So I think that the pieces are in place. There's really no excuse for the Bucs now. This is going to be their year to push for the playoffs, try and get a playoff bid with Brady, maybe in his last year in the NFL. So 11-5 and a playoff bid is really what I see for this Buccaneers. But thank you so much for coming on. We're going to put your stuff down in the description. Make sure you go follow.
Please check them out. Check them out down below.
Especially for all the new Bucs fans, bandwagoning with.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming on. We're gonna have more episodes just like this with other teams. Make sure to subscribe so you can see more episodes in the future. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.